Good morning. Hola, buenos dias, bonjour, guten tag, wanchang hao, shalom, boker tov, sabal ka, selamat pagi. Welcome to the World Coffee Alliance Crosstalk series, Digitalizing Access to Coffee Finance. Where is the beef? First, I would like to thank everybody who took their time to register and attend in today's event. We have a full house today. And second, I want to thank all the industry partners who have supported this event and shared the links with their members. Third, I would like to thank all the panel speakers who will take part in today's debate. And fourth, I want to thank MasterCard, our keynote for today, Drain Chain, our episode sponsor, and Professor Rocco Machiavello of LSE, our moderator, and for the two panels for all their great efforts that made this virtual event possible. At last, I want to thank all our media partners, Real Wire, Perfect Daily Grind, and Roast Magazine. We are live on YouTube, so even if you haven't registered, you can watch us on these channels. So just to give you a direction of travel today's agenda, we will have a keynote from MasterCard, inspirational talk from Grain Chain, two panels, both moderated by Professor Machiavello from LSE. So without further ado, let me introduce briefly our keynote for today. Laura McKenzie is SVP Financial Inclusion and Global Consumer Product from MasterCard. As Senior Vice President, Laura is responsible for developing, executing, leading, and adapting the global product strategy to deliver MasterCard's financial inclusion commitment to the World Bank to include 1 billion people into the digital economy by 2025 through the development and deployment of innovative products and delivery channels. Laura, the floor is yours. Let's welcome Laura and give her a round of warm applause, please.
Joseph, thank you so very, very much for having me here today with all of you. I'm truly humbled to be included alongside the esteemed group of industry leaders who've gathered for these important discussions. Creating access to working capital and leveraging digital and new and innovative technologies are critical elements and enablers to addressing sustainability and inclusive growth in the agriculture sector, something we at MasterCard are passionate about and committed to solving in partnership with all of you. I know we've got quite a global audience today, and I don't know about you, but where I'm from here in the US, and maybe because I've just watched the new Wonder Woman movie, ever since we were children and we picked up our first comic books or watched a superhero movie, we've been taught that invisibility is a superpower, the key to secret knowledge, to hidden riches, to concealed treasure. But the truth is, invisibility already exists and it profits no one. People who transact exclusively in cash are effectively invisible to the financial system. They lack access to credit beyond personal networks and informal lenders who can charge exorbitant rates that trap people in cycles of poverty. Those who do have financial accounts may not be able to access the money they've earned when they need it or want it. And when they can, they often face high fees and transaction costs, locking them in debt. Digital payments allow people to get paid safely and securely. They build a bridge towards growth and financial security for those who need it most. And the proliferation of digital technology over the last few decades has created new ways for people to connect to the networks they need to advance and grow. However, the benefits of this economic and digital growth, while significant, have not been equally shared by everyone. Invisibility is inequality. That is not a developed or a developing world problem alone, and it is not for the public or private sector to solve single-handedly. Have we reached a point where businesses can be partners and problem solvers with governments in the face of growing divides? Can corporates play an active role in making economic growth more inclusive? Simply put, we believe the answer is yes, Together, we are already reimagining what growth means for everyone in today's digital economy. But success in today's economy cannot be assessed using the mindset, measures, or innovation of yesterday. It's more than just an increase in wealth or trade. It's about human lives reaching their full potential. It's about being seen in a world where more than 1 billion people lack access even to a form of identity. A world where 3.4 billion people, almost half the world's population, still struggle to meet basic needs such as access to food and life-saving healthcare. It's about helping put more people in control of their own destinies. To achieve solutions at scale, we cannot rely on philanthropy or on environmental, social, and government investment alone, all of which are critically important, don't get me wrong. This is not about trading off business interests against social interests. It's about recognizing that businesses thrive in a thriving world and fail in a system that fails too many. We believe innovation can make commercially sustainable social impact business as usual. That's what it means to do well by doing good. Last year, in 2020, as challenging a year as any in our lifetimes, MasterCard achieved its goal of connecting 500 million unbanked people to the financial mainstream. Once we met that goal, we doubled down and extended our commitment to reach 1 billion people by 2025. Reaching smallholder agricultural farmers in sectors like coffee and cocoa are a big part of that commitment. We are reimagining what it means to achieve inclusive growth for people, communities, and economies around the world, for all of us. Everything we've done in this space could not have been accomplished without equally committed stakeholders like yourselves, from banks to fintechs to governments to NGOs and beyond. Payments have the opportunity to dramatically improve cash-rich supply chains such as those we see in farming. Imagine, for example, if farmers were paid electronically versus in cash. This would create a digital trail back to the farmer, which could create traceability in the supply chain, which can help reduce operational costs and add value for the major corporations that buy and sell such materials. But it's more than that. It could bring the 125 million people from around the globe who rely on coffee for their livelihood and who are trapped in a cash economy into the world's formal economy. In one of today's panels, you'll have the opportunity to hear one of our partners, who I personally know is passionate about this topic. MasterCard and Neumann Coffee Group have been working together to digitize supply chains within their ecosystem. Smallholder farmers in the Chiapas and the Veracruz regions grow a sizable percentage of coffee beans for the global market. But a middleman negotiating the prices can take a significant percent of the market value of the harvest and fees, minimizing the crop value to the farmer. The supply chain is opaque, leaving global traders with no way of knowing who is supplying quality beans and where to invest their efforts. But now they have the ability to be paid directly and digitally. On the ground, we're partnering with Quibo to help drive merchant acceptance. By digitizing the supply chain, these farmers now have quicker payments and access to financial services. Neumann's has more visibility and insight into its sourcing and a scalable, speedy, cost-efficient way to pay farmers. That's not the only way to bring greater visibility to the supply chain. Imagine buying your morning coffee and knowing exactly which farmer had grown your coffee. This kind of visibility is mattering more and more to consumers and consequently to suppliers. And so a revolution is upon us to digitize. Many supply chains are too complex for one company to do this on their own. The blockchain, which enables all stakeholders to securely and transparently transact on a distributed ledger, is a powerful lens to deliver insights on production and distribution networks. You'll be hearing more about that today. Provenance solutions that automate the flows of goods and track their authenticity will begin to thrive. This will be underpinned by blockchain and leverage serialization of items to track the identity of things. This visibility can better identify things like counterfeiting and quality issues. Consumers could use a mobile app to view the authenticity of their coffee, with traceability details provided by brands that include up-to-date information on the item's last known whereabouts and history. And wouldn't it be nice if you could send a tip back to an actual farmer to thank them for your morning coffee? But these innovations don't just happen. The recipe requires the right ingredients brought together correctly. From a payments perspective, we consider the right solutions delivered into a fully enabled acceptance ecosystem, partnered with a comprehensive financial literacy and education program to bring it all together into life in commercially viable, long-term sustainable ways. Innovations like these deliver powerful insights, but they also train a spotlight on the otherwise anonymous people who power our everyday lives. This isn't just insight, this is foresight. This is the power of visibility. So in conclusion, building pathways to more prosperous financial futures requires innovative partnerships, both public and private, because there isn't enough public assistance, foreign aid, or philanthropic dollars to solve the biggest social and economic issues. Through strategic partnerships, the coffee farmer can buy equipment on credit or expand his holdings, growing his business. The young girl in Uganda in a coffee growing family can attend school, broadening her opportunities for a better life. Going digital makes life faster, simpler, smarter, and safer for everyone everywhere. Payments will evolve to reimagine what it means to achieve inclusive growth for everyone around the world and how we can use technology and innovation to help people thrive. Perhaps the real superpower is not invisibility, but the ability to make billions of people across the world finally indelibly visible. Thank you very much. And Joseph, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Now we come to the inspirational speech for today. Luis Macias, a CEO and founder of Grain Chain. Luis is an innovator and entrepreneur that has nearly 20 years of experience designing, inventing, and implementing technological solutions in the government, agriculture, and insurance sectors. He has spent the last 6 years developing viable agricultural solutions that would become Silosis and later Grain Chain. His pioneering leadership ensures that Grain Chain will remain the leader in its market space. So let's welcome Luis to deliver his inspirational speech. A round of warm applause, please.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Here at Grain Chain, we've spent the last 6 to 10 years understanding what it really takes to digitize an agricultural supply chain. We've worked in many different countries trying to understand where and what do we have to do to not only advance technology, but make it meaningful. The reality is that the agricultural sector around the world is in dire need of full digitization. We've done this in the financial markets, the medical, and in many other markets. And there are many technologies that we're really trying to figure out how to apply to an area where connectivity, where technology, and sometimes where education is very limited. How do we actually implement the idea of inclusion when the limitations are great? What we've really found overall is not only does technology improve our ability to operate, but the ability to not have the finance side to it changes elements tremendously. What does financial inclusion really mean? Financial inclusion to many of our farmers mean the ability to actually create and grow and live above just sustaining yourself to the next season. How do we get there? How do we apply this kind of technology in areas that are extremely challenging? We not only have the limitations of connectivity, of education, but we also have the barriers of trust. How do we change the barriers of trust on both sides of the spectrum? The reality is that when a person accepts the fact that they want to go into financial inclusion, they still have the barrier of trust against the institutions that in the past have maybe not been as effective to them. So how do we get there? What do we do? Our first real aspect is traceability, is understanding where things come from. How do they get there and what happens? One of the biggest barriers we've seen in the industry has been that financial institutions want to lend, that different types of partners want to participate in the supply chain, but they don't understand or they don't see how they can make this possible. How do you lend money to an industry where the risk is higher and the reward is lower? There's a social and absolute need to be able to push this down to our small farmers who survive off of very, very, very thin margins. We start creating technology that allows us to push not only the information directly from the stakeholder, but it allows the financial institutions, the insurance institutions, the exporters, and the buyers of these products to understand that these products are not only handled properly, but that they are being done in a way that excludes child labor, that excludes areas in bad actors that don't want to do things correctly. As our partners at MasterCard had said earlier, in a lot of these industries, the biggest gainers are the middlemen, the intermediaries. The people who gain the most are those people who take advantage of those situations. When we start giving them digital tools that allow them to prove that things are there, and digital tools that allow the stakeholders, the buyers, and the also financial institutions to understand what's going on, money starts flowing. We've been able to work tirelessly in different areas that allow us to understand how to get these technologies to our partners, how to educate small communities to understand that technology is not only friendly, but there to help. That is the first process of true ability. Transparency is our second step. Being able to understand that our exporters, our buyers, and our financial institutions are not taking advantage and are trying to do a positive thing. That our farmers are working hard to do great crops, get things to the right locations, and participate in a positive manner. Here at Grain Chain, we've been working tremendously in creating very simple and effective tools that allow for not only the understanding of the processes of the farmers, but also the process of the actual participants beyond the farmer. Understanding what logistics are, understanding how to get things there. We've worked hard to hand over not only a shield, but a sword to our small agricultural partners. When we talk about a shield, is that we give them the ability to communicate what the quality of their product is. We give them the ability to have historical data to be able to go to financial institutions and be able to grow their inclusion when it comes to loans, when it comes to performance. But we give them a sword that allows all of the participants around to understand that they have quality products, but it gives the farmer an education of what their product is worth. When an actual farmer knows that his product is worth more on the market, and we start exposing them to those markets, we give them the ability to not sell at the bottom dollar to the intermediary. We give them logistics management tools that allow them to move their product into better markets, into markets where they're going to be paid more. And that gives us the ability to create digital records on a blockchain ledger that allows them to see not only what they've done, but what they can do and what they can make. that starts changing the dynamic of where we are. We start building out not only a true ability of them to defend themselves, but a knowledge of the fact for the industry that they've produced something, that they've produced quality, and that they can continue to produce this quality. In order to break this vicious cycle, in order to create true sustainability, we need to educate and we need to give them tools that have a very low cost and a very low implementation. We need to get them out of a cycle that allows them to not only participate in the formal financial institutions, but also gives them the ability to truly get paid well. How do you turn a small community of farmers and how do you get them into financial inclusion? We've started to create tools with digital wallets, with minimal viable information for them to be able to start get paid digitally, so that they can not only store their money, but have a safe place for their money. What happens in our cash economy when people get paid in cash? Not only are they susceptible to negative situations, but they're also in a situation where it is harder to maintain that. How do we make it easy for financial institutions to lend to these partners, to these farmers, to these participants in what we eat every day? We give them a very easy method to not only enter the financial markets, but we give them a true reality of what they've done in the past, a digital record of not only the progress that they've made, but we also give them rewards to where if they become part of these financial systems, they start to learn, they start to get education, they start to get historicals, and they become a powerful partner. Here at Grain Chain, our sole focus has been not only to create true financial inclusion, but to enhance the position of the small farmer to be able to defend themselves, but also to be able to take advantage of the true nature of their products, to get full payment for what they are doing, and to understand that technology is not only their friend, but it is also the key in the tool to advance them into the next world. We truly are honored to be in this industry, and we're making changes that not only are going to change the world, but they're going to change individual lives. I really thank you for this time, and everyone at Grain Chain thanks you for participating in this webinar. Joseph?
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for that very inspiring speech. Now we go to the next part of the program. This is the panel one, which is going to be moderated by Professor Rocco Machiavello of LSE. Just to save time, we have published all the speakers' bio on our website, www.worldcoffeealliance.com. I also want to remind the panel speakers to follow strictly the WCA 3-minute rule so that we can have a level playing field and making this conversation more engaging, fair, and meaningful. So before I hand in to Professor Rocco, each panel will have 55 minutes, 2 questions, and the rest is Q&A. We have received advanced questions for the panel, around about 40 questions, but we will also try to incorporate questions from the chat. So if you have any questions, so just use the chat feature and we will be able to try to answer them for you. Now, in the event that we're unable to include the chat questions, due to time constraints, we will also, as we do in previous webinars, we will ask our panelists to answer them after the event, and we will send the responses back to you via email. So don't be discouraged, okay? So Professor Rocco Machiavello holds a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics and Political Sciences. Rocco's research interests are in private sector development, and he has done extensive work on the coffee value chain. Professor Rocco Machiavello, the floor is yours. So let's welcome Professor Rocco and give him a round of warm applause. And Professor Rocco, you have the floor. Please introduce our distinguished panel speakers for panel 1.
Right. Well, thanks. Thank you, Joseph. Welcome, everybody. A good day to everyone. We are indeed on a tight schedule, and we are looking forward to an exciting panel. So I will start by introducing our guests. So I will just ask everyone to say a quick hello as I call your name. We have Chris Brett from the World Bank Group.
Greetings, everyone. Looking forward to today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We have Gerardo Pataconi from International Coffee Organization.
Hello, everybody, and yeah, happy to be here with you and Joseph and Rocco and all of you.
We have Don Juan Esteban Orduz from Fede Café, Colombia and New York.
Yes, hello, everybody. Looking forward to also participate. Thank you for the invitation. Welcome.
We have Peter Onguka from Root Capital, Nairobi.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning. Pleasure being here. Thanks.
And then Blanca Castro from IWCA Global in Guatemala.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for including us.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Let me again remind our panelists the WCA 3 minutes rule. So I'll try to enforce that as well as I can. So let's start with the question. This panel is about finance. So the first question is about working capital finance. Working capital finance is the blood of the coffee value chain, and yet it is incredibly challenging to provide it. And so I would like to ask our distinguished panelists to discuss the main challenges they face and where they also see the opportunities to improve access to working capital finance for farmers, for co-ops, for processors, for exporters. I would say, why don't we start with Blanca, and then we walk up, so to speak, the chain. We go to Peter, then Juan, then Chris, and then Gerardo. Blanca.
Thank you so much. Once again, on behalf of the International Women's Coffee Alliance, I do appreciate the invitation today and talk a little bit about this very important issue. From the IWCA perspective, where we are working with 27 organizations around the world to empower women into the international coffee community to achieve meaningful and sustainable lives, to have a better opportunity into the coffee value chain. These are very, well, the challenges are many, are the same as everyone else. Low coffee prices, high cost of production, the effects of climate change, that at the end, the coffee producers are the ones who suffer more due to all the natural disasters that happen, not only this last year, but as you well know, we are under that circumstances every year, and every year is a little bit harsh. So the challenges are many, but for the coffee producers in the area where we are working on, being included into all these initiatives where coffee producers could have more access to finance, or at least education, to get to understand more what their possibilities are. That is the main issue. They need to know that there are other ways they can go and get closer to the organizations that can help them. But the only way to do that is to provide them education, workshops, information. And sometimes there are many barriers, not only language barrier, but also work barrier, because women, they have double or triple load of work. So we need to face that and really be clear on what they are doing. For example, sometimes they are not even able to prove the ownership of their own land, so that they can get access to all the system of the financial tools. So for us, education is the key of all the solution to these challenges.
Thanks, Blanca, for bringing this perspective. Peter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So picking up from Blanca, I look at it by starting with the challenges. So from the challenges and root capital's point of view, number one is just the cost of loan origination, because I'm looking at it from the cooperative point of view and the processor. Based on their location, it's very expensive to reach to where they are located. The second one is the short-term opportunity cost, which pushes most of financiers to look for the up market, because with the up market, there is low risk, there's high return, and that one seems to be more attractive, but most of the cooperatives, you know, they are not that well formed and they have so many challenges. So the last one is what Blanca's talked about, lack of collateral. Because of lack of collateral, we find that it's not easy for lenders or financiers to exercise their rights whenever there's a default situation. So what are the opportunities? So looking at the ag lending, there's a lot of impact within farming activities and within the coffee sector, because we find that from the financing they receive, they're able to pay their farmers on time. And this one in turn help the farmers now to do those activities that we've been talking about, tilling their lands, preparing their coffee, spraying them and doing all that. Then at the same time, from the loan and the income they get, the women's will be well served, the ecosystem will be preserved, and the youths will also get jobs. Then now coming to Root Capital's way of doing business, that's our model. We are impact first because we focus on the impacts created from the ag activities or from the farming and the coffee producers. So from this impact, we see that there's a lot of potential that has to be tapped. At the same time, working with cooperatives and producer organizations, we bring about the bankability and showing people that lending in ag is profitable and viable. So how do we do this? We are able to access finance as root capital, both from philanthropic and impact investment, which help us to mitigate those risks that we've identified, like logistics, traveling, and all those. And at the same time, we are able to pay our investors some good returns. Then our model, we call it triangulation model, whereby the cooperatives and the producers they're able to bring their contracts from their buyers, which now acts as collateral. So from the collateral, we are able to advance them. And from the advance, they're also able to reach out to their members, if it's a cooperative, or to their suppliers and pay them on time. And again, this one will also have a multiplier effect downstream. Then the last point is our blended finance, where we do both credit and capacity. Because by pairing these, we are able to train them to build their capacity, to improve their governance, to help them be able to look at it from different directions. So all this combined, it has also helped us now to create a lot of impact within the communities that we work with and also within the societies. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, Peter. Don Juan.
Thank you, Rocco, and hello to everyone. I think that the name that was given to this panel, like designing an ecosystem for the future of coffee, is a very pertinent one, because we keep thinking, okay, what's an ecosystem, and we can go to any definition. So, but basically, we can think as a coffee value chain as an ecosystem in itself, but also we can think as the coffee production of coffee producers as an ecosystem themselves. And the question is, what do we need to guarantee the future of coffee? And I'm going to focus, because that's what we're doing here, on coffee production and coffee producers. And that's one of the big question marks that we should looking at. I think the inclusion of the financial system is just one piece of the bigger machine, bigger machine, because we have a systemic issue here. We have a systemic issue where we can blame the industry for not paying the right prices. We can blame the government for not having the right rules. We can blame the farmers for not being efficient enough, the farmers associations. We can blame everyone and anyone for farmers not having the resources that they need, namely financially or otherwise. But the big question in the end is, how do we make sure that farmers can prosper? How can we make sure that farmers, that all these things we're discussing here, will end up in farmers' prosperity and farmers being able to be better off generation after generation, the way we all aspire? And this is beautiful to say. I mean, this is a big question to have. I think one of the main topics I keep discussing also with everywhere, including the ICO, is we need to focus on prosperity of farmers and see what we need for them and who needs to work on that. So let me give you a few thoughts. I mean, one, of course, we need to focus on prosperity more than just living income, to make sure that farmers have, can prosper like everybody else wants to do. The second is who should be working on it? Everybody. We should be working the farmers themselves, the producing countries' governments, multilateral financial organizations, NGOs, intergovernmental organizations. They all should be working on creating the right environment, the right ecosystem for farmers to thrive. How to do it and which areas can you cover? I mean, you have on one hand the access to finances, to the financial sector, which is maybe one of the core of the question. What do they need to access that? The first thing that they need is a collateral. And as much as we can have, conceptual discussions, in the end is we need to get the players to, it's an expensive proposition to do, and it's a very time-consuming project to achieve, a goal to achieve in conflicts with difficulty in remote areas. Think of Colombia. In Colombia, you've had a conflict for 50 years. Most of the farms of this, most of the farmers are small holders, very small. Average coffee plantation in Colombia is less than 4 acres, about 1.5 hectares more or less. And by the way, the average age of coffee farmers is about 54 years old. So we're having serious structural discussions. What do we need?
I'm gonna stick to the 3 minutes because you're touching already on some of the team for the next question.
So let me just wrap up the whole thing, which is we need to make sure that we get land titles. That has to be financed, has to be organized. It's very expensive, and we need to get so they can have the collaterals. And the next thing we need to get, and we're getting there, is get them the tools through connectivity to be also part of the model financial world. And just a small final thought, which is everybody's thinking we need to bring the infrastructure. Yes, but it's not a matter of putting towers of connection. That we can do. The question is, who is going to pay for the service? Can farmers afford to stick to the service? Can they pay the connectivity, the cell phones, the computers? How will they pay for that? So all those things we need to look at in a much more holistic way than just how to access to a bank account.
Okay, thanks, Don Juan. And I feel Chris will have something to say about this, maybe. Chris.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I mean, just building on and sort of like supporting comments from colleagues and following your 3-minute rule, let me start by saying it is deeply depressing when the coffee price of 2010 and 2020 are about the same. That is deeply depressing. We have to look at really the financial structures around the coffee. We're looking at the markets. We're also looking at the production systems. We're looking at the logistics, a lot of things that have been said. So just to basically come to it like this, I work in the World Bank. My clients are governments. The governments, of course, are there to service the people. The farmers are the private sector. We must always remember that. They are the private sector. We are at the World Bank really working hard on how we support government policy to improve the access for the private sector, which is farmers, to work to the markets. The World Bank, obviously we're thinking of agriculture here and agriculture and food systems where I work, but I do stress that the World Bank supports tremendous amount of infrastructure, tremendous amounts of capacity building, education. It was also talked about capacity building. We have to bring these all together. We also, the World Bank, we're not just here to lend money and help and support governments. We're here to look at and funding innovation. We've had some great talks about the digital debate and the importance. I mean, I really look to the digital debate to connect the smallholders to finance, to services, education, support, the whole package. It's not just about money through digital, it's about connecting. But I still stress that the digital is not a silver bullet. We've been doing tremendous amount of support to the digital debate, to smallholders and SMEs. We have a lot of struggle in the adoption, the understanding, the learning, the use of the digital. I'm a little bit tired of people telling me how great it is. It is there, but it's always down to that last mile, down to that last 5 miles, the connection, whether it's electronic or whatever. Extension agents still have to go out and teach and train farmers on everything. We're looking at the digital debate to really look at de-risking and supporting and strengthening those connections. We lend about $3.5 billion a year to governments. About 40% of that money goes into value chain development. What does that mean? Value chain development covers many, many value chains. Coffee is there. I'd like you to realize that we do a lot of support on credit lines to governments through this financing. We also do a lot of matching grants to structured SMEs, matching grants to help the blended finance model, to help and support. And we also work, I'm going to say, in the back door of the financial institutions, trying to strengthen their environment, their governance, all of these things. We're really trying to strengthen that package behind so we don't distort any form of interest rates. We want to make the interest rates viable to the smallholders. At the moment, as said by Peter and others, the actual interest rates are far too high. On that note, I'll stop. I know there's questions. I'm looking forward to further conversation. I just want to frame that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And so last but not least, Gerardo maybe can bring some perspective to this as well.
And mute myself. I believe that, a lot has been said. And try to feel some of the complementary elements here from the ICO perspective, where we are, continue to be a forum for identify solutions. And of course, we understand very clear that, there are, and I'm glad you divided between the cash flow, the short term and the medium long-term financing. Now, if you focus again on the short term, I mean, what are the solutions? Small farmers, individual family-run farmers, they have problems. They have problems because of timing, because they have problems not only to access to the credit, but also because the moment they manage the cash flow, they have problems when they have to get the inputs, when they're actually earning the money out of selling coffee. So that's one of the issues. There are, of course, way to, it has been said, how to overcome the question of collaterals. But we've been focusing a lot now recently, especially in our recent coffee development report 2020, on what does it mean to be integrated into a global coffee value chain. This is, of course, is an opportunity because you have access to knowledge, you have access to market, you have also access to finance. And of course, we cannot avoid mentioning, the pre-harvest financing schemes that would exactly fill that gap and enable even small farmers. So that also is one of the options to be considered. In addition, I think it's also very important is the ability and the need by the government to help putting together farmers. Small individual micro farm is going to have always problems. I don't think there is any solution for that unless you can bring them together. Together, you can access to insurance scheme, to even financial instruments that are more sophisticated. You can negotiate better with your buyers. You can negotiate better with your governments. So I would just focus on this. Looking in the integration of the global supply chain, working together as a group of farmers, and that's, I think, the experience here for a number of you, especially from our friend Juan Esteban, is very relevant. You have to be able to negotiate and address those problems collectively. Individually, you cannot.
Thanks, Gerardo. This is great, and thanks the panelists for sticking to the timeline that we suggested. Yeah. So the first question was more maybe about working capital finance, but of course, finance is not just for the short term. It's also a lot about the long term. And so I would like to ask maybe, you know, almost in reverse order, to think a little bit about long-term finance, for particularly thinking about the next generation of farmers, and be it for the sustainability and the diversification of the farms, being it from the point of view of environmental sustainability, such as the design of payment for ecosystem, which could open opportunities in the coffee sector. So again, what are the main challenges, but also what are the main opportunities here? And maybe this time we start from the big guys, the multilateral, and then we go back to the producing countries. So Chris, why don't you take the lead on this one?
I think this is the most exciting area, and I really hope that people can imagine a vision. You know, what is a vision of a coffee farmer? For me, a coffee farmer and other farmers, you know, they have two income streams. They have the income stream from their products, which obviously they have to produce to standards and qualities, etc. And I'm sure colleagues will talk about that. But they also get incomes from their environmental management. You know, all across the world now, farmers are saying, how do we get access to extra funds to support our environmental management? We at the World Bank are working on two areas, and I think these are really, really important to think about. One is above ground carbon. You know, how do coffee farmers improve agroforestry systems, reforestation, and so on? And how can they receive, you know, carbon payments, ecosystem payments for that work? Now, that work is fairly advanced in many places, and there are systems now, you know, really good quality monitoring, reporting, verification systems at lower cost due to technology. You know, we've been working with NASA, we've been working with WRI, the World Resources Institute, all of these well-known organizations for really looking at how can you really drill down to that square meter and see the changes in the landscape and reward and finance. And the World Bank has been putting a lot of funding in its biocarbon funds, its FCPF, the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, as well as building into a lot of our lendings with the government, incentive payments, payment for results to meet and mitigate, build resilience and climate change and reward. You aren't going to change your practices unless you're paid to change your practices. Simple. Then the second one is much more visionary. This is about really looking at soil health. You know, we know across the world, we are depleting soils. Soils are in terrible conditions across many countries. We look at soils from the organic matter point, the water retention. Why does it take twice as much water to produce a ton of cocoa in Nigeria than it does in Cote d'Ivoire? Because of the organic matter, because of the soil quality. So we're looking at here, how do we build systems to actually really focus on rewarding farmers through carbon sequestration within the soil space? And I think this is important. This is two levers, above ground, below ground. Above ground is advanced, below ground isn't. You know, I think the visionary point is how much money can a farmer get from his income for this environmental management? The last point I'm going to make is it's a little bit contentious. You know, everybody presents to me this niche point of sustainability. Oh, farmers will get premiums for this niche product. Everything cannot be niche. It has to be mainstream. So mainstreaming means that these environmental services must cover the startup costs to really implement, really strongly implement these new practices of land management, ecosystem management, carbon management. I'll stop there, Rocco. Thank you.
Thank Chris. This is wonderful. I'm gonna make an appeal for those who are following us. Please send the questions in the Q&A, and please ask a question on this. I hope the Q&A will give us an opportunity to follow up on some of the points Chris has raised. But again, going back to the long-term finance, Gerardo, do you want to also share your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think, thank you, Rocco. Yes, to build on and I fully subscribe on Chris' point of view, and I think this concept of diversified income and looking into the circular dimension of the coffee economy is definitely one way to find that kind of solutions. I mean, just yesterday I was talking, we were in a group with some UN and others and industry looking into washing stations, but also biochar. There are a lot of opportunities there. I believe that regardless of the price, by only selling coffee while you have other resources you don't exploit, that is a short-sighted strategy. So this is, just to complement on what Chris was saying. But of course, we have to see that the investment that a farmer or a small farmer can make is very negligible. I mean, there have to be a large-scale contribution by federation, by government, by international community, where you can, really change and invest in the landscape. And that would be looking into new varieties. We know that, responding to climate change and other pressure and pest and diseases, you have to improve varieties to be more productive. You have to look into how to your best practices, and you have to invest in technology. And the last part, I think also mentioned by Chris, you have to look at the infrastructure, because many rural areas, and I think, also Peter was mentioned before, you have no access. You have constraints in terms of logistics, mobility, trade facilitation. So if you don't invest massively on that, then the small farmer will be less and less competitive and less able to actually continue producing coffee. That would, I think, the emphasis should be on. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerardo. Juan, the floor is yours. You come from a beautiful country with forest that is the envy of the entire world. So,
Thank you. I'm going to build a little bit on what my predecessor said, and there's something that Chris said that I think is very important. We need to think long term, and we need to give farmers the incentives to be. The tools and the incentives to be sustainable. However, we cannot, thinking long term cannot prevent us from thinking short term, because the biggest predator of the environment and society is poverty. And you're hungry today, you're not hungry in 4 years. So we need to deal with that too. So how do we create that long-term incentive? By dealing as well with the current situation of farmers, which is he brought something about the coffee price, which is dramatic. I was mentioning before we started this panel that one of the issues that we have in Colombia. I mean, some people are doing, farmers are doing better than many others, Brazilians as well, but that's because of the exchange rate. Their income in pesos. So this is not the coffee business; it's an exchange rate business. So we need to create the structure for the coffee business to be prosperous and profitable for them, sustainable and prosperous and profitable. And that goes, let me go back and to finalize the not just the inclusion, again, the private in the financial system, but including the land titles, and something very important that we don't have, or farmers don't have, pension. Farmers cannot retire. And we need to create the environment where pension becomes part of something they have access to. They have to die in the farm working because they have no way to retire anytime. So we need to create this whole holistic environment, thinking long-term, I agree 100%, including carbon sequestration, which is very important, and the incentive for that, but also deal with the today issues and the today and tomorrow issues that we cannot leave aside, because those are the ones who will allow us to create the medium and long-term policies and achieve those goals.
Fantastic, thanks, Juan. Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Taking cue from Joan and the rest, we've seen that there's a lot of things that we can do as financial. So as root capital, as we all remember, in 2010, there was La Roya and Blanca. You remember that it destroyed so many coffee plantations. So that one just kind of bringing the way we should be looking at sustainability, and also just making sure that our coffee farmers are able to have or to renovate their coffee plantation. So as root capital, because of that, we're able to give them what we call Coffee Farmers Resilience, Coffee Renovation Fund, which helped us to give them loans, which we structured long-term. So with these loans, they were able to renovate their coffee plantations, and the payment modality was based on their annual revenues that they get from the operations, income from the operation. So this one was a real plus for us. And again, as we all know, most of our farmers, they live year to year. So every year you find that by the end of the season, they have nothing based on the challenges that we've all outlined. So this has helped us to be more creative, come up with other ideas that can help bring sustainability. So how do we do this? We look at it from the gender lenses, where we come up with gender equity grants, so that we look at women-led only. How do we promote women-led organization? How do we bring in a more of women leadership into the coffee value chain? So we do this by giving them small grants, and they come up with projects which encourage women to work with them to be part of the management in cooperatives. The second one is climate. We've been talking about climate all along, about forestation, deforestation, diversification, all these things we are talking about. So for Root, we have lenses whereby for cooperatives which are involved in climate smart ag, we are rewarding them by giving them also grant to continue doing that. And this one helps us because they get more motivated, they get more encouraged, so they plant more shade trees, they come up with climate smart agri ways of doing it. So this one is really encouraging. So then the last one is now on the next gen, because you also touched on the next gen. We cannot leave youth. We saw that our country, like in East Africa, that 5% of them are youths. So imagine with that population, they cannot be left out of coffee farming. So we have to bring them on board. They like digital things. So with digital business intelligence that we are piloting, they're able to come collect data and then use that data to make informed decision, use that data to share with the partners who they intend to work with, and also use that data just to make them feel that they are also playing a part. So all these are innovative ways, looking at long-term, looking at sustainability. And with this, at least we are able to play a part in this value chain called coffee. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Peter. And then last but certainly not least, thinking about the long term, Blanca.
Thank you so much. And I thank Peter for mentioning that, because it's, I know there are many organizations trying to encourage women to be included into all the coffee activities. IWCA chapters, 90% of them are they are from coffee producing countries. And all the work that we do are driven into three main axes: leadership development, market visibility, and strategic partnership. So talking about technology is there. And thanks to the partnership that we have accomplished throughout all this time, we got to develop a project in Rwanda with our chapter IWCA in Rwanda with blockchain. It has been a successful one, and we still need to wait a little bit longer, like 1 year, to have final results. But this was our first step, the milestone, to participate into technology, high technology with blockchain, and we are looking forward to replicate the project in other IWCA chapters. We are working and finding the funds so that we can bring this knowledge to other chapters. The first in our list is Jamaica, for example, the chapter in Jamaica. So, but although technology is there, we need to do something now, right? To bring this education, this knowledge to all our groups. So last year, we developed also a pilot workshop with a group of ladies in Central America, in Latin America, actually, because Mexico also participated, and also Peru and Brazil. This pilot workshop was based into how to manage microloans. So how they can gather their own groups, small groups, and with pencil and paper, start as small groups to support themselves with microloans as small as $50, for example, and how they can create other projects to diversify their income so that they can have more possibilities to reach out to these financial tools. I know it's sounds very simple, but when trying to put all this community together, they need to establish a structure, right? And they need to follow up. And we are very lucky to have this manual and many experts who are helping us pro bono to gather the group of ladies, thanks to the health crisis nowadays, it's very easy for us to connect through the internet and get this knowledge done. So we are still working on that and moving forward little by little, trying to get as much information, as much knowledge as possible. And as Laura's mentioned in her speech, be visible and be heard. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Blanca, and thanks everyone on panel one for sticking again very rigorously to the agreed timeline. I think we've put a lot of meat on the fire. So we have about 20 more minutes. We have received a number of questions from the audience, some in advance, some today. So I'm gonna start asking a couple of us, but I'm gonna make sure that we spare a few minutes at the end also to rediscuss some of these issues about the long term, because I think these are very important ones. So one of the questions that has come from the audience, from many people in the audience actually, so is about how to overcome the lack of collateral, which makes it very difficult for smallholder farmers to access finance, both working capital and long-term finance. So this is a question that came from Leopold from Congo, Caleb from Zimbabwe, Jimal from Ethiopia, and many others. So anyone wants to add some thoughts on how to try to fight that lack of collateral?
Yeah, I'll just come in briefly to sort of open this conversation. This is obviously very, very key to all of us. You know, we can't, it's very, very hard to lend to a sector where there is very limited collateral, number one. And also there's huge risk. You know, when you look at the price fluctuations of 20, 30% over a few years, the risk. I want to, one high level comment that's disturbed me a lot over the last 6 months. Many of the leading commercial banks have actually said they're starting to move away from the agribusiness sector. You know, a very general comment, but very meaningful, because this has put a lot of pressure on development banks like the World Bank and others, where our goal is actually to crowd in the private sector, to leverage the private sector. So here, you know, a lot of the risk that is perceived on agriculture, agribusiness has really gone high. And also one made a very, very important point about the currency fluctuations as well. You know, there's a lot of factors. So we're doing a lot of work with governments on policies to really try and enable the private sector to work. So I encourage people to look at our Enabling the Business of Agriculture reports that we do, EBA. We also have done a lot of looking at finance, and the increasing level of finance is actually coming from agreements, off-taker agreements from the supply chain companies to producers. But when we interview them, the problem they have is the lack of structure. You know, no one wants to lend to a small holder. They want to lend to groups. Yeah. So the policy has really got to encourage groups to come together. Then the last point I'll make is land. You know, land is an asset class all over the world and except in many, many emerging countries. Where I am today, my house is worth less than the land that it sits on. So the collateral that I have is 60% land, 40% house. So when you look at a coffee farmer, you know, what does he have? You know, if he can't monetize his land or use it, that's a problem. So land registries has been a big thrust of the World Bank. We've had success in some countries and not in others. And the reasons why we don't have success is the political will. It's all about the political will. So I'll stop there, Rocco.
Thanks, Rhys. I'll feel that Peter can sort of, and then maybe Juan, is that?
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Yes, looking at it from what we do, and working with cooperative societies, we'll find that there are cooperative societies which have savings and credit circle with them, so within them. So from the members' contribution, they're able to borrow within the cooperative. And then the role of now Root Capital is just to make sure that their financing provided is sufficient and also to train them. So we are able to train them on cooperative management, governance, and financial bookkeeping. So with this brings sustainability in the sense that they know how to price their individual loans. They also know how to make sure that it's sustainable and also use the premiums they get by selling their coffee, by pumping in some within their financial pool. So the model that I can talk about now, because of lack of collateral, and there's so many farmers that are within the cooperative, is just through the co-guarantee mechanism that they can enjoy by just being a member of a cooperative and working with the other members to acquire those small loans. Thank you, Prof.
Juan.
Thank you, Rocco. I think we have again a short-term and long-term situation. On one hand, we have the commercial financial sector, which is, I mean, can we demand from Citibank that they will give loans to people with no collateral? It's kind of difficult unless we give them something else.
Yeah.
Some other guarantee of some kind of some government support or something that can help make that happen. On the other hand, we have institutions. We have the World Bank that with different entities. We have a Rabobank. We have co-ops. We have different organizations that work on the social side of lending, let's say, money to producers, to farmers all over the world. So how to manage those? I think in the short term we need to encourage, financing. Let me call it social financing, to give it some name from the private sector. It's difficult to demand from the for-profit financial sector to just lend money to people who have no collateral. I'm not saying it should be done. We should find a way to do it. But definitely, and I agree with something that Chris said, is you cannot monetize your land, your biggest asset. So what basically your land it's worth the crop of that cycle, but that's it. Your regular income, because there's no way you can leverage your income somehow with the value of your land. There's a way you can sell it. There's nothing. So a huge effort needs to be devoted, like what Chris was saying, is to be devoted towards titles for the land, because this is kind of a structural solution more than everything else we could be doing. But we need to go to structure and finance and have government support for titles for the land of the people. Remember, there's very small farmers, very small.
Thanks, Juan. Maybe, I don't know if Blanca or Gerardo also want to come in again on this. Yep.
Thank you. Well, the only thing that I can mention is that we encourage our groups to develop their own partnership locally, so that they need to get in touch with their local authorities, those organizations who are taking the decisions, and see how they can go through their way and participate. They need to be there where the decisions are made. And of course, their organizations are very small, but at least to be of influence, if they can change the rules of how the money can be accessible, they should be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanca. Gerardo? Okay. All right. Maybe I'm gonna follow up a little bit then on the discussion we were having on long-term finance, and on, kind of just throwing a couple of ideas to our panelists. The first one is on this issue of the eco payment system, or payment for eco services. I mean, this is something that if it was indeed adopted in, sort of relatively widespread, and there were a credible commitment in place, that should also relax access to finance, not for smallholders. Because, you know that you have if you protect the forest, say, you're gonna have an income stream, and that's something that maybe the government is even committed to pay, or some large organization like the bank or other organization. And so that's pretty credible as an income stream. So I was wondering whether there are thoughts on that. And the other thing is on the land, I agree, is critical, but if the default is going to be driven by, say, a poor harvest season, is a default that is going to affect many people in the same localities, right? These are kind of aggregate shocks. So then it's going to be difficult to repossess vast amount of land from many farmers. I'm a little bit concerned about the sort of moral hazard there on, when it comes to the repossession, even if we had given titles to the farmers, which of course is something that should happen. I think would be very beneficial, but I'm thinking about when the crisis hit, are we really going to repossess that collateral? So I don't know if Chris or Juan wanted to.
Let me just come back on. I think what I'll tackle your question on the environment payments. What you were completely right about is that we've structured what we call P4R, payment for results. payment for result means that, you know, you're going to get a deferred payment in 4 years if you do X or Y, and it adds up to Z, you know? So it's really, really critical that underneath that, we layer instruments. This is where we work with the governments, where the governments need to start putting upfront money to the smallholders. Now, this becomes complex. It's a complex, you know, point of description of communicating, working with smallholders. You need that level of sophistication to understand how all of these can work. And what is the valuation point? What is the market? I mean, the World Bank has been guaranteeing through Red Plus and through a lot of our agendas, $5 per ton. Not the world's best price by any means, but we're trying to kickstart a market. I mean, many people talk about markets, $30 a ton, $50 a ton, $70, you know, there's all these numbers, but at the end of the day, there's always a number, but what is the transaction? So my straight comment to you there, Rocco, is very, very clear, you know, that in 4 or 5 years, yes, this money will come. But if farmers want the money now, we have to build an instrument with a local bank, local, you know, with the government, where the government then has got basically a credit line with the World Bank or whatever. We give a credit line, then they can lend, you know, they can put the money forward against that credit line with a guarantee that the bank will pay that money back in 4 or 5 years. So it's a way of trickling the money out. You don't want to go and pay all the money up front. You know, you've got to build the money as it goes forward. There's also the other thing, there's a lot of transparency issues around what we call beneficiary plans. You know, you can't just say, I'm going to pay people all this money. You've got to sort of, what is the mechanism? How does it work? Who's the fund manager? You know, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of complexity. So we're working those through. There's a lot of good examples under the Red Plus agenda where these flows are working. You know, and of course, I just wanted to say one point that we haven't picked up. Europe, the US, and developed markets are now turning around and saying through local legislation, national legislation, regional legislation, if you don't bring deforestation-free products to our country, palm, cocoa, coffee, which is also socially acceptable, no child labor, bad labor, it can't come into our market. This is a strong message to national governments. You have to change. And the World Bank and others, this is the World Bank Group, you know, the International Finance Corporation as well, we've been asked to help national governments restructure, developing local sustainability standards. We're lending a lot more into that space on building a future. So I want to be positive, but also stress that the government is not an entity. The government is multiple institutions. Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water. It's tremendously complex to align. I mean, I can talk for 3 days on this subject, so not 3 minutes. I'm going to keep myself tight, but I'll stop on that on the environmental side. Back to you.
I can imagine. Yeah, Gerardo.
Yeah, no, just I want to refer to some of the, we organize within our consultative forum on sector finance, one actually you participated. And among the solutions, I mean, apart from technology and other things I mentioned so far, of course, looking at new instruments and their fit, and again, I stress what I said before, only through grouping, clustering, and creating cooperative, because individually will never be able to, but, you know, looking into the green financing in a broader sense, and looking also into insurance schemes, because the problem, as I say, there is a cash flow, there is a long-term investment needs, and we have to look at different options that are available there. But these are available only through groupings. So we'll be looking at, for example, one of the, you know, this IDH farm feed, that is an interesting scheme where they try to de-risk and get closer to group of farms. We'll be looking into green bonds, for example, as another solution. But again, that all this de-risking and ability to reach farmers works only if you have an intermediate, a way to manage that. That is key. And I'm sure that Peter also, they see that you can't reach the individual one. So a lot of emphasis in what we try to do, what should be done, is to really, and the government as well, not only to make sure that you comply with standard, but you can do that collectively, not individually. I think, you know, I'm stressing that because I see that's the only way to be practically and to try to solve problems, because otherwise we'll never be able to solve it. Thank you.
So in that sense, Peter wanted to.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I was going maybe Peter quickly and then Juan, because I'm sure that Juan has experience to share from Colombia there.
True. I just want to tackle the issue of the land, because as you've said, when you're dealing with a cooperative that has 20 washing stations, and they present 20 title deeds to you and they default, logistically exercising your rights on those 20 titles is almost impossible. So how do we circumvent this? It's just by working with partners who are able to guarantee the loan by giving you like first loss guarantee of between 50 and 75 and tell you, guy, if you make this loan and you lose, I'll pay you 75% of the loss. So this one encourages more of lenders to play in that field. And also by training and that other things that we bring, it also helps just to bring a level playing ground within the cooperative and also to encourage them to employ good governance. So I just wanted to bring the other side that we can use risk sharing as a tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Juan.
Thank you. Let me just try to illustrate the complexity of the issue, because when you discuss it here and then we go to the ground, it's a whole different ballgame, or maybe a much complicated ballgame down there on the field. Think of the following situation. Think of that you are a farmer in Colombia, Nariño, Huila, you name the place, and at some point you have been displaced by an illegal armed group. And that's, or whatever, drug traffic or what, any illegal person or group. Then that person, and you're forced out of your land, and that person gets his hands in getting a illegal or by through a bribe or something title to your land. And that person sells that land to a good faith party, to a third party which acts in good faith. And then you come back and you say, okay, I want my land back because I was displaced with violence. How long is going to take this process of the judiciary for the rightfully owner to get back his land? And second, to just illustrate the complexity, what about the third party who bought in good faith that land? So this is, I mean, the title is not just, it's so complex in many countries. I mean, Colombia is an extreme case, in not unique, but extreme also because of the conflict. But this makes it very complicated. On the other hand, you have something that Chris touched, I think is very important, and Peter, is what's incentive for people to act responsibly in deforestation, carbon sequestration, and so on. On one hand, there should be a positive incentive, but then there's another incentive, which is, okay, if you don't comply with all these things, we don't want your product. Who is going to help me comply? I'm a small farmer in the mountains in Nariño, where I don't even have a road or a wheel, or you name it. How am I going to comply with everything that people want me to comply? So it brings me deeper into poverty, those kinds of things, unless we're not buy your product, but we will make sure that we help you comply with the whole situation. And that's that's happening on the ground. And that's why I keep saying, the biggest predator of the environment, society, and the community is poverty. If you cannot feed your children, how do you expect anyone to take care of the birds and the water sources and the forest? That's not going to happen. So we need to create the long-term and short-term at the same time to make sure that the short terms and medium terms guarantee the long-term policy or solution. That's our goal.
Thanks, Juan. It's a very male-dominated panel. So Blanca, I certainly don't want to make sure that you get the space. Do you want to add anything on this?
Yes. Well, it's as Juan Esteban mentioned, this is very, very complex, and we need to put attention on all these facts: political, environmental, social, cultural. It's a lot. But then, from the perspective of the countries of origin, we need to support all these initiatives created by, for example, the International Coffee Organization or the World Bank or any other the Specialty Coffee Association, and many other organizations that are trying, as I said, detangle all these plate of spaghetti, because it's really complex. There are a lot of things, and we need to be very careful that we are all talking about apples with apples, bananas with bananas, right? And then the conversation turns a little bit more complex. But then again, I would say that me as part of this international organization representing so many origin coffee producing countries, to support the initiatives of these organizations that are able and capable and willing to detangle all these knots and see how we can find a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you.
Thank you, Blanca. I'm afraid we only have a few minutes, way fewer minutes than questions that we could still ask. One question that came from the audience, and that's something that was already kind of touched upon very briefly. I'll ask you to really give your thoughts very quickly, if you have any, is with regard, and this is a question that was asked by Connor from Guatemala. Connor is interested in hearing a little bit more about financing between exporters and importers in consuming countries, which is something that Chris alluded to, Peter maybe alluded, and then of course also Juan and other might have thoughts on. We have talked a lot about financing what happens on the farm, but what about financing what happens in other parts of the chain? So who wants to comment on that?
All right.
Peter, go.
Okay, I'll talk about financing exporters because I know we have Mr. Moneybag, Chris, and Johan. Yeah, so for exporters, as I'd indicated before, all that we need is the contract from a buyer. So once you have that contract, we just do a due diligence on the buyer and reach out to the buyer and confirm that they are able to triangulate the payment. So the model is very simple. The buyer agrees to pay root capital. Root capital agrees to finance you. You get your coffee, you export. When the importer pays you, it comes to us, we send it back to you. So it's just as simple as that. And with that, you are able to access your finance, you are able to buy coffee from the farmers and meet your target. So that's simple for the exporters. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, Peter. Juan.
I was about to say something very similar to what Peter said, which is if you're going to lend money to an exporter or someone or a trader, or I mean, that's a pure business transaction.
Yeah.
You have contracts behind that. It's just a transaction. Where you, it's when you're talking about small farmers, again, less than 4 acres or 1.5 hectares in average, 0.6 hectares. We're talking about a social transaction. So we need to play by different rules. We cannot apply the same rules to the exporter or the trader or the industry that we apply to farmers, because they just don't have even the coffee. The coffee that each farmer produces is not enough to have access to a significant, to use that as a collateral, to have access to a significant amount of money that will help him or her improve the business, production business, let's say, in a significant way. So we need to look at it from the social standpoint more than just from the business transaction standpoint.
Thanks, Juan. All right, my sense is that very much as I would like to hear more from everyone and on many other issues, which I guess we'll ask our panelists to answer sort of offline. I think that we need to wrap up with this first panel. I want again to thank our panelists, Blanca, Peter, Juan, Gerardo, and Chris. And then I'll hand it back to Joseph. And yeah, thank you again. This was a very interesting discussion, and I've certainly learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocco, Professor Rocco. Panel one speakers, thank you very much for your contribution. And I know fully well that this is just a start of a more conversation, and we will provide that particular platform for everybody. So as we prepare for the speakers for panel two, I think it's highly important to bear in mind after hearing what the panel one speakers have discussed, is that I hope that these discussions will not remain simply as a discussion point, but hopefully we can turn our attention as an industry for the plight of our smallholder farmers, which is really at the heart of the World Coffee Alliance value proposition. So I, of course, realize that it's a very complicated thing. You know, the coffee industry, we are one family, but it's a very complicated thing. But we could do it with baby steps, but at the same time, if we know where we're trying to head, then I think it will be much easier. And we cannot do this alone. We have to collaborate as an industry in order to make sure that we reach really the target. And also, let's not just think about, you know, our own businesses. You know, let's think about those who have less in life, for example. There's a lot of stories. For example, in Tanzania, they are cutting down coffee trees because the price of coffee does not include the price of production. This is a very, very sad situation for the farmers. So I hope that the big institutions like the World Bank and also the IFC, etc., will be able to find some solutions to directly involve the farmers, and also social enterprises like the Root Capital, for example, are able to extend their lending hand to make it, you know, this business is much more viable in the coffee industry. There's a lot of sufferings there, especially with COVID-19 pandemic, and of course the economic downturn as the effect of this pandemic. For example, there's a lot of people in Guatemala, for example, that are going to the US borders in order to leave their farmers, you know. And it's very, very important to think and reflect about these problems. And we cannot solve this on our own, but very essentially, we need to find some measures that are practicable, that are easily implemented with the farmers in our minds all together to make sure that they get the benefits of whatever digitalization can do in order to make their life easier. So we learned very much about how panel one has focused on some of the challenges, but these challenges can also be turned into opportunities. And that's the reason why I agree that financial inclusion is a very important part of the whole scenario of the coffee industry. And this is the only way that we are able to at least remember that at the end of the day, what is important is the inclusion of all the stakeholders in the coffee industry, and making sure that each segment of the industry help one another, and we go forward to make sure that everything in each segment are doing their best to help the other segments, because collaboration is key. Digitalization is a tool to achieve that. But at the end of the day, what is important is that farmers realizes that there are organizations, NGOs like Fair Trade, and everybody that are helping them to achieve their particular mission. So I think the panel 2 is now ready. So I will hand it back to Professor Rocco. Professor Rocco, you have the floor. So please introduce our guest speakers for panel 2.
Thanks, Joseph, again. Hello, everybody, again, and it's a great pleasure to have this second panel. I'm going to introduce our distinguished panelists, so we'll just ask everyone to say hi. We have Dr. Panos Varangis from the IFC.
Hello.
We have Catalina Heikenberg from NKJ.
Hi, everyone.
We have Dr. Frederic Kavuma from IACO.
Hello, everybody.
Anthony Day from IBM.
Hello, everybody.
And Luis Macias from Grain Chain, who have you already heard before.
Hello, everyone.
All right, fantastic. So again, we have a lot of meat on the fire, so we'll have to kind of get going. And I remind our panelists the 3 minutes WCA rule. All right. So The first question is this panel is mostly about digital technology. And so we will want to talk about digital technology in the coffee supply chain from farm to cup. And we'll try to provide specific example and studies from the different points of the chain. Okay. I would like to ask each of the panelists where they see the most exciting opportunities generated by digital technologies, but also I would like to gather from the panelists where they see the most challenging aspect, or the greatest challenges in order to extend digital technology in the chain. So I'll give the floor maybe we start with Luis, and then we go to Anthony, Catalina, and then Dr. Panos and Dr. Frederick. So Luis, floor is yours.
Thank you for your time. Digital technology is an interesting concept. We understand that we need to apply digital technology into agriculture in an urgent need. We can accomplish so much by being able to understand where the products are coming from, understand how to pay our individual stakeholders, create an efficiency in not only where it comes to the process, but also the finance world. And all of this is extremely attractive. We all understand that by making everything more efficient, people are going to get more money and things are going to become more clear, and we're going to be able to apply the same concepts we do to other industries. The realities are that digital technology is not something easy to implement in many regions of the world. You can even take a country like the United States that is highly developed and has an infrastructure. And when you start applying digital technology into the agricultural world, you have limitations. You have connectivity limitations. You have limitations of being able to implement and educate into some of the new worlds. What we found is going into areas with less education and less development and less infrastructure, we have two different opportunities and two different areas of extreme need. One is that an area that does not have any technology is ripe for disruption. It's ripe for implementation, where you can implement something that is extremely centered and useful. But where that comes in is the lack of infrastructure and education. And the focus has to be tremendously on educating and being able to have boots on the ground. The reality is you cannot really implement this technologies without boots on the ground, without people being able to teach not only what inclusion means, teach what finance means. With Grain Chain, we've done an excellent job in Central America of being able to implement not only simple technologies to be able to include into banking systems, include into overall transparency and digital systems, but we've been able to really educate all of the participants. Digital technology is nothing without the tools that are built with that in mind, with the ability to create a very easy implementation. But without digital technology, I do see sustainability not existing in the future. I see us being able to do these things by being very, very hands-on, by being very in-depth in what we're doing, and by being able to educate all of the different participants. Grain Chain's doing a really, really good job of being able to focus on the individual and on the individual person.
Thanks, Luis. Fantastic. Anthony, given that blockchain won't save the world, what it's going to do for us?
Hey, thanks, Rocco. I imagine you're going to kind of anticipate the answer I'm going to give you. But first, before what am I most excited about in terms of technology, let me contextualize it a little bit and build on what was said before. I think the main opportunity around technology is the enablement of creation of data, creation and passing of data, around automation of activity and the connectivity between multiple parties. Right now, that's a little bit conceptual. So let me kind of break that down a little bit. What we have in any supply chain, whether that be coffee, whether that be grain, whether that be cocoa, any commodity or any high value good, is you've got a supply chain from end to end. It starts with, typically speaking, a low technology, low data environment farms, rural agricultural environments, and ends up in a, relatively speaking, higher digital maturity environment where the end consumer somewhere in the world is going to be engaging with a product. They're going to be making a cup of coffee, they're going to be going to Starbucks or wherever it might be, and they'll be engaging at that level. What we want to try and do with technology is flip that and try and increase the amount of data that we have, because ultimately the world makes its decisions on data. You and I make purchasing decisions on data. Banks make lending decisions based on data. And unfortunately, at the front end of the supply chain, we need to rebalance that disproportionate data to allow farmers, to allow collectors and cooperatives to use that data to empower themselves. That could be about telling an artisanal story. That could be about demonstrating the price that they get relative to the end consumer's price. That could be about the carbon story, particularly around their products. It could be used as supporting evidence to get banking and finance. Right? Creating data in a secure, trusted way at the front end of a supply chain is critical. This is where blockchain plays a big story. Unsurprisingly, you thought I was going to mention that because it allows you to do that in a decentralized way, where any farmer, any farm, it makes it easy for them to connect onto a platform where, providing you get the data transformation and protocols right, and this is the challenging bit, which I'll come to in a minute, you can ensure trust in the data because it comes from an authentic source. And also you can connect the dots. So rather than thinking of supply chain as an end-to-end line, you can think of it as a circle where all parties in that particular ecosystem can enjoy, can share, can have visibility on the data that's available and that's being created. So that could be around production, that could be around logistics, that could be around pricing, that could be around carbon. All of that data that we're creating in that ecosystem powers what we do next. Right? And that enables us to create the experiences like we're doing with Farmer Connect that allows an individual consumer to click a QR code and engage with their product. That allows the farmers themselves to have information on a ledger that looks at their production data, their pricing data, information that creates a digital history against which they could look at credit scoring and bank lending. You can even get into the domain where you can look at equity crowdfunding. Our previous panel talked about bank lending and traditional models of grants and loans and so on. Equity crowdfunding allows you access to capital that is hundreds of times bigger than any bank has access to, where you can look at rates or you can look at the cost to the farmers in an incredibly different way. And the access to capital can come from multiple markets worldwide, not just the individual country or the NGO in which is lending in that particular environment. So there's a huge amount of potential. The challenge, and it's one that I think has been mentioned a number of times in the first panel, and is one that's going to be reiterated over and over, is the first mile, is supporting the digitization of the understanding of how do I create data, how do I store data, and how do I have the idea or the concept of a digital wallet in which I hold my data or my farm's data, or maybe even data relating to the funding that I receive. That first mile is a critical challenge, but once we can get over once we can encourage and enable the data creation at the first step, we unlock all of that future opportunity.
Yeah, we'll talk about the challenges in question two, but yeah, fantastic. Catalina, what are your thoughts from the perspective of a very large buyer and of coffee?
I'd say what I'm most excited about is around digital payments, enabling a farmer to get cash at a time of the year that is completely disconnected from the harvest time. So basically today, and it's been sort of hinted at before, one of the biggest challenges of farmers is they have a really uneven cash flow. They receive money for 3 times a year, and then another 9 months of the year, they are cash strapped. Companies like ours, we have the willingness to take the risk and give advances of money when farmers need it. But yet, operationally, this is a major challenge because it is so hard to disburse money in the hands of farmers. And even with a lot of the new technologies coming these days, it all goes down to the farmer group. But a farmer group is not a farmer, and you still don't know exactly how much the individual farmer received if you just give the payment to the farmer group, which is the way it works today. So if one is able to have some form of digital payment mechanism that goes all the way to the actual individual farmer, which is a lot of the work we're doing now with MasterCard, with some of the pilots that were mentioned before, we can make sure from our headquarters that we can disburse to the farmer. Let's say they need to take a child to school, or pay for school fees, or they need to take a child to hospital. And in these moments, the farmer, even if they know how much their crop is worth, they will go to a middleman and they will ask for cash because they need cash urgently and they have no other option. And they will accept any terms for that transaction because of the urgency. So it's this need for cash that is tying the farmer to the middlemen, the coyotes. And companies like ours who are trading very large quantities of commodities in the world market, we have access to finance. We know a lot about these farmers. So we can establish credit limits based on past coffee deliveries, for example. And yet there is still the operational challenge of disbursing that kind of money in the farmer's pocket. In Uganda, for example, we have established a mobile money credit facility where farmers can request money from us at any moment in time. And if they've been pre-approved in our system, they get the money within seconds. We disperse directly in their mobile money wallet. And this is possible because mobile money works really well in Uganda and in Kenya and in some other countries in East Africa. But in Latin America or Asia, this is not possible. The mobile money ecosystem is not there yet, and most farmers don't have a bank account. We don't have a way to securely just send them money. And this part, I think, is where I'm most excited, because I'm pretty sure this space is going to develop so much. And then this will eventually make farmers become independent and have options from those middlemen, all these lenders that they are, just tied to because of the lack of options. So I would say this is really the space where I see huge amount of impact that can happen. And then on a little bit on the flip side of the coin of that, of course, the challenge is still massive, right? So even, we've been working with MasterCard now for multiple years, doing 2 pilots in Colombia and Mexico. And it is so hard. It is so hard to break this, ecosystem that is just based on cash. It's informal, it's intransparent. A lot of farmer groups also are not particularly keen to see this happen because there's a lot of vested interests at that level. But reaching the individual farmer is so important. And in this field, I think technology has a massive role to play.
We'll talk about the challenges in a minute. Let me give the floor to Dr. Panos from IFC, where you see the main opportunities of digital technology.
Yeah, I think that the digital technologies is the game changer. We have been talking a lot about the traditional banking or microfinance model, or where donors come, but it's the vast amount of capital from the private sector, as Anthony also pointed out. And with this, the new technologies, the digital technologies, where you can mobilize this capital, because why the capital is not moving? It's not moving because of asymmetric information. They don't know information about farmers. They don't have information to assess the risk. Everybody tells you agriculture finance is risky. And then when we talk to banks or MFIs or financiers who know what they are doing, we find that their non-performing loans are lower compared to other loans. So, there is a lot of a myth and a hype of agriculture. Oh, it's risky, we're not going to get there. We have been looking recently about these digital platforms where they create an ecosystem and they bundle various services, from weather, from access to inputs, for e-commerce, for output, for access to finance. And again, finance, not just the traditional credit. Actually, a lot of these platforms, they started with index insurance. They offer index insurance products and e-wallets, savings. So more recently, of course, they have moved to credit, including also this crowdfunding credit source, which is getting more and more important. So these platforms, by creating this ecosystem where you bundle services, financial and non-financial services, is very important, because you generate data, and has also multiple multiple impacts. For example, farmers, they can see the weather, they can optimize input, they can get advice. So you can create a better environment for these farmers to be more bankable, to be more profitable. And it's not just about access to finance, it's about bringing bundles together. We're going to be talking about the challenges, but I agree with Catalina. Scalability we're seeing a lot of pilots and we hit some kind of a wall. And then what will break this wall and get to multiples like hundreds of thousands rather than few thousand dollars. And we can discuss that as you said, in your second question.
Fantastic. Thanks, Panos. And Dr. Fred, where are the main opportunities from your perspective?
Yes, I would say in Africa, the African Union has developed a strategy, the digital transformation strategy, and we have the Smart Africa initiative, whereby the target is to make sure that we have a digital single market in Africa. This is a great opportunity. There are a few obstacles that we have, but we'll talk about that. One of the key issues is that is slow adoption of new technology in terms of payments and so forth. Farmers have been very much used to the cash payment. So as Catalina has said, there's been a change, and we see a lot of move now towards digital. There's particularly one company, the ADF Man company in Uganda, the Chagalanyi Coffee, which has had a very successful project of making digital payment to their suppliers. But what I see is that they are dealing mainly with the middlemen. They're dealing with the aggregators, mainly because the farmers are very small, and the company has a limitation really in reaching, getting to the last mile, if we might say. But I see also in Kenya, we have the Commodity Fund of Kenya, which has launched their digital payment. They pay the money directly to the farmer through M-Pesa. And this is a very good approach, because they are able to cut out any middleman in the way. And of course, there's Olam, who is also doing a similar work in other parts of Africa. But Olam, of course, is a lot in cocoa in West Africa. But in terms of coffee, I think we have seen these few projects that have started, which are a good opportunity that will lead us into adoption of this in the future, because of the mobile money technology and the way that it has been embraced in Africa. So I think that's a great opportunity for us, and data on the farmers will also help as we go along, because data is still a big challenge. In Uganda, there's a new law. There's a new law which is encouraging farmers to register. So this registration of farmers will help to create a database, and Uganda will probably be a first example to others. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we heard about the main opportunities in payment, more generally mobilizing data for raising finance, and we talked about the critical roles that the large players, the buyers, can play. Now I would like to talk a little bit more about the challenges, and in particular the challenges in onboarding farmers. So really the last or the first mile, depending on how you see the chain. Okay. So maybe I'll ask, we'll go in reverse order. We can start again from Fred and bringing his perspective from the producing countries on the challenges, and then go to Catalina, then Anthony, then Panos, and finally Luis. Would that work? Fred, what are the main challenges to the technology is there? Why is it not more widely adopted?
Yes, one of the key challenges is there's what I would call a trust deficit, where farmers sometimes are very suspicious of new ideas because they want to stick to what they have used before. The other challenge also is the poor coordination of policies. Policy action sometimes discourages farmers because on one hand, if the government encourages farmers to use mobile money, and then after that you impose a tax, and then you impose other levies, you know, which basically a penalty to the farmers adopting this technology. So there's the tendency then for the farmers to want to stay with the old methods. The other thing is the connectivity challenges. We have lack of coverage in some of the areas, and so some of the farmers might not have access might not be able to really apply the technology to their maximum benefit. Then the other thing is this limited size. You know, the farmers are small. As Catalina said before, the farmers are small. And, you know, in East Africa, farmers are really small. You are talking of sometimes less than an acre. So this small size of farmers, it can be a very serious problem in terms of, you know, getting this digital technology to be applied. And also the capacity of the cooperatives is very limited. We need to actually build the capacity of these cooperatives. And, you know, I mentioned before that Uganda is putting in place a legislation to have all farmers register. The problem with this is the suspicion. The farmers now are very suspicious. Why does the government want them to register? So although we want the data, there is now we have to build trust, first of all. And then we have to build a capacity of the farmer associations, the cooperatives, to be able to help even in terms of getting the data and having the digitization rolled out you know, across the different African countries. So building capacity of the farmer groups is critical when you have very small farmers, as is the case in Africa. So capacity development, I think, would be one of those ways in which we can overcome this. Thank you.
Fantastic for this comprehensive view. Catalina, can you share your experience, given that you have tried to roll out some of these digital technologies to farmers? What were the main challenges you encountered?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one can split the challenges into various categories. So one is just some basics are lacking, like, you know, we've been supporting hundreds of farmer groups in East Africa to switch their accounting and their operations from pen and paper into digital. And it turns out the biggest challenge is reliable electricity. You know, they have iPads or smartphones, and just charging them sometimes is an issue. And so, you know, we can talk about blockchain, etc., but if people cannot charge a basic device, we're stuck. And a lot of your basic assumptions to make something work are just not there. And that's one. And the other one is 3G. Like, we operate projects in Mexico where just a couple of hours outside of Veracruz, which is a pretty modern city, it's absolutely void of 3G. And so, you know, we try to work with micro merchants and with farmers to switch to cash into digital payments. And then it turns out our biggest challenge is reliable 3G access, or like, how far is your closest 3G access point to the community that you are working with. So, you know, before we get into some very complex stuff, some of these infrastructural basics, if they are lacking, then the whole thing will not take off. And you might think, oh, well, this whole thing doesn't work. And it turns out it's not that the technology doesn't work, it's that people have not been able to charge their phones, right? So that's one part. I would say the other part is, and I would like to emphasize this because often in a lot of the conversations around this, people think that a farmer group or a co-op equals a farmer. So if they bring technology to a farmer group, or if they bring a payment or a loan to a farmer group, it means that all the farmer members in that group are getting access. And that's not the case. There is major issues around governance within farmer groups. And yes, a lot of it needs to do also with capacity building, because there is a lack of capacity, but there is also vested interests. And so, you know, for everybody who's working in this space, please never assume that whatever technology or money or knowledge you bring to a farmer group, that it is going to automatically go to every individual farmer. And this is something where we gotta open up that black box of that, you know, that aggregator entity that sits at the last mile of the supply chain. And just because it is on paper a farmer-owned organization, that it is going to always be a benevolent entity acting in the interest of farmers. It's not necessarily the case. And we need to open this black box, and we need to make sure that money is reaching the pocket of individual farmers, that the technology is being accessible by individual farmers and not just by a couple of leaders within a group, a co-op, or a community. This black box, I know it's a complex one and it's a Pandora's box, but we need to open it up. And it's, you know, it's a process. It will take quite a while. So for me, it's one of the biggest challenges as well.
Fantastic. This is certainly very thought-provoking consideration. Anthony, what about the challenges in the last mile?
Sure. I want to amplify what Catalina said, because there's a truism there that is true of giant corporates in the Western world, as is true of Mexican farmers in rural communities, is the digital maturity and governance. Right, you face exactly the same challenges in a major digital transformation for a corporate as you do for a cooperative. So these are concepts that should be familiar and should be echoed no matter where you are. Right, if you can't digitize, if you can't standardize first, then you can't digitize. If you can't digitize, then you can't automate and transform. Right, and so when you're going through these programs, in some cases you're thinking, you know, companies that I work with regularly thinking, well, which type of cloud provider am I using, or do I have the ability to work with hybrid and multi-cloud? That's not the same problem. Well, that's not the same problem you're trying to solve for with rural Mexican farmers as you're trying to solve for with Western corporates. But the genesis of the problem is the same. So let's make sure that we've solved for standardization first, about digitization second. What I would like to talk about to build on that, I just wanted to kind of double click there because it resonates with what I go through on a weekly basis, and I don't spend a lot of time with rural Mexican farmers. So I just enjoyed the symmetry of the problems. The other part of this is critical around beyond technical feasibility and governance is commercial viability. Right? The three things that are important to make any digital transformation work. It's got to be attractive to the consumer or the user, in this case, the farmer. We've got to be able to do it technically, which is a combination of, can I upload the data? Do I have electricity and do I have 3G? Right? Those are the basics. Are they technically feasible? And how do I overcome those things? The third thing is, who's going to pay for it? Right? Is it commercially viable? And the assumption in a lot of people's cases is that the farmers are going to pay for this transformation, right? And they're going to take a loan, and they're going to buy a mobile device, or they're going to, have tablets, and we're going to rely on the traditional, bank-based, lending-based model to transform this part of the supply chain. Which actually, the hurdle to overcome here is a mental one, or one of framing, is that actually the value case can be made at any stage. If you swap that supply chain from being linear to being circular, anybody within that supply chain can have the input in terms of capital, or can fund the business case. The fact is that if you want to, or if you're legally or regulatorily required to trace carbon, or if you're regulatorily required to trace the circularity of your products, which is regulation that's coming in from the EU right now, and I realize it's going to be different in different jurisdictions. But in that case, that regulatory burden falls on somebody at the theoretical end of the supply chain, but needs to be drawn back all the way to the very beginning. So actually the ability to fund those transformations is as able to come from the retailers, the suppliers, even the customers at the traditional tail end of the supply chain, as it is to come from the farmers or those immediately close to them, the cooperatives or the NGOs in region. So let's change the paradigm of thinking about where the funding can come from. Think about how the entire supply chain can cooperate to put the funding in, because the benefit will ultimately come to all. Right, so that's a big part of the commercial viability that I wanted just to kind of point out for a second there.
Right, thanks. Panos.
Yeah. I think a lot has been said already, and I don't want to be repetitive, but I want to go to a point that Luis made in the very beginning about boots on the ground. You know, we talk about digital technologies, but there is a lot that to make these technologies stick is you need to have boots on the ground, and also to address a very important issue that Fred, it was very nice to reconnect with Fred after so many years, at least virtually, the issue of the trust. I recall a project that was MyAgro, was this company that was making commitment savings to purchase inputs. And I remember in the very, very beginning, there was a scratch card, and people who were entering into their phone the number from the scratch card, and they were registering the savings. And we noticed that the people were keeping the scratch card, that they were useless, of course, but that was the record. That was that they knew how much money they had by keeping a stack of these spend scratch cards. And it took a long time before they graduated, before they trusted the system. Also, there is this issue about educating people and into the technology and other matters. So we should not underestimate this issue of the boots on the ground. There is also in another place where we try to put digitization of payments, that was coffee. People really, they had some problems with cashing in and cashing out. They were up in the mountains and was a very difficult, even though there were incidences of theft. People were bringing money up in their house and the money was disappearing under the mattress. So we thought that is a no-brainer to convert it into a digital wallet that they cannot be subject to theft. But it was a pushback because they said it was very difficult to buy a beer in the small colmado. That you know, where can I get the cash? I cannot bring my e-wallet. I cannot buy the beer with my e-wallet. So I think that the issues of connectivity, of trust, and the ability also to have boots on the ground will be quite important. The benefits are significant. The other issue that I see is there is a lot of kind of a startup capital. How do I start one of these digital platforms, and how do I scale up? And that's where we need to have some kind of, you know, equity capital, VC capital on how we can bring to have the initial costs for this type of technologies.
Fantastic. Talking about boots on the ground, Luis, how did you make progress on overcoming some of these challenges? Or,
I mean, I think it's obvious that our last mile problem is our biggest problem. I think that when working on the ground and seeing what's going on, is that the only method of success is by local interaction. Us being able to understand that we have to crawl before we can fly, that we have to crawl before we can even walk. Understanding that by involving a lot of the local participants to work with the digitization, involving education in schools. You know, a lot of the groups that we're working with are teaching the kids about using smartphones, teaching the families and inviting the parents to come with them in some of these very, very rural school environments. We've been able to create tools that work offline and online so that they don't feel the frustration of not understanding their information or their wallets because they can't connect to 3G. And we understand that while cellular is a very widespread technology, we've been implementing a lot of low frequency mesh to be able to get them to connect, to be able to understand basic information and be able to move forward. Our challenge is great, but our technology is also very, very advanced. You know, creating simple use technology to collect simple data, start to crawl, and start giving them the benefits. If we think that we're going to eliminate all of the intermediaries and middlemen in one day, we're extremely incorrect. They own a lot of the passage routes. They own a lot of the work that goes in. What we do is we empower a lot of the cooperatives and groups to be able to gain finance, but through the use of our smart contracts, we only allow individual farmers to access that finance. We don't allow the groups to touch that finance. What the reality is that when we're working with large sums of people, because they're very small farmers, so you're looking at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, local banks don't have the ability to underwrite this kind of work. So by creating automated underwriting systems, by creating process automation when they receive and requiring the data to be inputted directly from the source, we start becoming more successful. By giving them tools on their smartphones that allow them to collect this data without internet connectivity. And when they come and they give the product, that data is pushed into the network, we start crawling. When we go a little further and we start giving them the ability to be connected, you know, I think one of the biggest problems is not only power, is not only access to phones, but how much does a service cost? If the service is something that's unapproachable, then you need to give them a network that they can connect to where they don't have to pay the connectivity, low frequency Wi-Fi. We've applied and used many different technologies to be able to enable this kind of access. This last mile is the imperative mile. I've been told by many groups around the world that this last mile is an impossible feat. And we've slowly been able to crawl into capturing the correct data, being able to qualify the data so that we can de-risk the lending. I know that most people want to do the right thing, but they don't have access to do the right thing. By giving them the tools that they can use and they cannot get frustrated with, we have a concept of a big red button. And if it's more complicating than pushing the big red button, they're not going to use the technology frequently. And so we have to understand not only that our audience is limited in connectivity, we have to be able to start crawling by teaching and implementing in small amounts and seeing and creating trust, because if you're able to prove it in small amounts and you're able to grow, that trust grows. My neighbor was successful with this project. I want to be part of it too. And we create that network effect among all of our different participants. I think the most important part of everything we're doing here is understanding that we're trying to benefit the small farmer who doesn't have access. If we start implementing technology that's benefiting everyone else along the chain, it's going to be positive, but we need to focus on the small participant. By creating a full ecosystem and a full suite of tools that allows everyone to participate, we start opening up the transparency and we start de-risking the loans, but we also start enabling these farmers to really be able to have technology that they can use every day, whether they have connection or not, and they're able to implement.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much to all the panelists for keeping within the time and you know, for offering this very interesting discussion. Now, I have two news for you. The first news is a good one. We have received a lot of questions for this panel from the audience. Really many questions. The second news is a bad one, though. We only have about 15 minutes. So I'm gonna throw a few of the questions that we have got from the audience, and I will ask you to answer as quickly as you can, and I'll maybe already direct the question to certain respondents, okay? So for instance, so one question that we received, this is from Joke from the Netherlands, is can startup coffee platform like Beico, Algrano, Almacena, a few other, be a disruptive game changer in the coffee sector? And I think here I'd like to ask this question, maybe starting with Panos, who's been talking about some of the platform.
Yes, I think that can be a game changer. One of the things, though, is that, and that's probably Catalina may be able to say whether these platforms, if it's only for coffee, for example, if I receive my coffee payment once a year, or you know, in a period of November and December, and then the rest of the time I don't use the platform, that will make it much easier. So the question is whether a platform should be very specific, or should also be able to conduct other transactions because make money with the frequency? Like, for example, in China, these big e-commerce platforms where it's not only that you can do your agricultural transactions, but also you can buy a television.
Yes, Catalina, do you want to add on that, or how do large trading houses like NKJ sort of perceive this platform?
So to be very honest, I think a lot of these platforms still rely on people like us to actually source the beans, because you can have the platform where the consumer will order a product, etc., but you still need some pretty serious logistics behind it of people who are actually sourcing the beans from the farmers, shipping them, making sure that there's insurance, making sure that the qualities are compliant with everything. And that's the role that we play, the traders in the middle. So for me, the platform ends up being a bit more of just another brand almost facing the consumer. But if you look at what's behind the stage, there is normally a big trader. Now, I know that there is a bit of a disruption now as well with more direct trade, or like a push for direct trade, where very small roasters are saying, I want to buy directly from farmers, which is great. But again, you need a lot of logistics behind, and you need the capacity to do that. So a lot of people think that as the traders, we're just like another middleman. But to be very honest, I do think there's a major function here of a lot of logistics and bringing a lot of efficiencies that are completely behind the stage. We are completely B2B. So like the end consumer and the brands, there's, that's just, what goes on stage, but behind the stage, you've got a lot of work going on as well.
Yes, I might come in on this one real quick, Rocco. I mean,
go Anthony. Yes.
With any platform, it's about network effect. Right? So what startups are brilliant at, absolutely fantastic at, is identifying a problem, creating a fantastic user experience, creating usable technology around that experience that's going to involve SDKs and APIs. It's going to make it easy for others technically to embed with it, and that's going to be great. How do you get the network effects? A couple of things, right? Firstly, can you get enough of the buy and supply side on the platform? How do you attract buyers? So have you got budget for marketing? Can you get access to enough of the right farmers, enough of the right buyers? Or again, like Catalina said, do you involve a few large intermediaries to help things go along? So thing one. Thing two then is breadth, right? So can you actually get access to enough markets? As a startup, the challenge is, can you get into enough places quickly enough before you run out of cash? So how might you partner to expand? Second thing is depth. As Panos said, if you're a one-trick pony, if you've only got one value chain or one end-to-end flow, that's going to limit you or limit your usefulness to a number of the edge cases or a number of the geographical specific challenges. So for these guys, it's how do we allow the ecosystem to help them grow? Right? If these really are the platforms that we need, that we've been crying out for, let's try and get around one or more platforms that we can continue to grow out, rather than seeing multiple small players all fighting to be the best mousetrap or the best coffee platform. Everyone's probably got a whiz-bang UI, but it all comes down to implementation. And we don't have a digital product here, we have a physical one. So that adds to the complexity.
Yes, I think that, my understanding resonates what Anthony said, and certainly also what Catalina said. And I was actually surprised that to see how many questions we received were about how to get rid of these middlemen, where the middleman sometimes can be seen as being the very large trading houses, and sometimes it's a smaller guy. But I do think that in many cases, these middlemen are actually doing a lot of the logistic, a lot of the transport, a lot of the documentation, sometimes the finance that needs to happen. But so let me push a bit more on that, since it was really an area that got a lot of questions, somewhat to my surprise. There's people like Geoffrey from Tanzania and David from the US who ask what digital tools will need to be adopted in the coffee supply chain to improve the farmer's negotiating position. This is maybe something we can ask Frederick to comment on, and then maybe Luis, who hasn't yet been brought back into this Q&A.
Yes, when we talk of helping the farmer to be able to negotiate better, you know, it's assuming that you have a farmer who has got a lot of coffee. So you think that you are dealing with a farmer who has maybe a production of several tons of coffee in a season. That I think is already possible today using the traditional, you know, phone technology and so forth. But when it comes to the digital technology, those farmers who have that level of production would not find it a problem. The problem is for the small farmer who is producing just a few kilograms in a season, you know, not even thousands of kilos. So it would be a formidable issue for this farmer to think that they are able to negotiate, you know, in the market. They need to be agglomerated into a co-op, and at the level of the cooperative, that's when it's possible to be able to engage and use the digital technology. Otherwise, it becomes wishful thinking for any small farmer to think that they will be able to engage in the market.
As
Thanks,
far as
Fred. Luis, yeah.
As far as our experience is that there's two ends of this table. There's the negotiation between the farmer and the cooperative or the aggregator, and that there's a negotiation out into the exporting world. And one of the big things that we've been focusing on has been giving the farmers tools to be able to enter into negotiations with their individual cooperatives. Just because they belong to a cooperative doesn't mean that's the only source that they can sell it to. And what we see a lot of the times is that these members of these cooperatives will go out and sell to other areas because they get a better price. And sometimes it hurts the cooperative and sometimes it benefits the farmer. If we give them tools that allow them to understand and secure forward contracts, if we give them tools that give them the ability to know that they're going to get paid a certain base amount, and even create digital aspects to where they can get premiums once the coffee is sold, then it gives them the ability to lift up their own cooperatives and not go out and sell into the street. A lot of the times we see the urgency of the need of them selling their products for money now. When they know that if they take it to the cooperative, they're going to have to pay their loans back. They're going to have to wait for a while for it to get sold and then maybe get some money in the future. When we start creating forward contracts that guarantee them money and we attach financial instruments to those contracts, they're able to get their money right away and they're able to do things in a lot more agility. It takes education and it takes time. So if we want to ever see farm gate prices to where the end exporter is buying from specific farmers because they're doing great jobs, we need to encourage this kind of activity where we involve the local finance, where we involve local insurance, and we involve them in these contracts that are overly simplified in a digital platform that allow them to negotiate at the first level so that they can eventually in the future negotiate at the second level.
Yeah, Luis, I mean, building on this, I mean, one word that we haven't talked a lot about is traceability. So we have a question from Stephen from Kenya that asks, how do you tackle the challenge of traceability of coffee using technology? It seems to me that a lot of what we are talking about needs to build on traceability.
Absolutely. And I think that one leads to the other. In order for us to have an external market, they need to ensure what they're buying. In order for us to be able to sell to anyone outside of the local group, we need to ensure what's going on. We need to give them free and efficient tools to be able to track what they're doing and be able to push that on to the secondary party for that ever to be a consideration. Because if you're going to buy specific types of coffee, and especially when we start talking about premium coffee and coffee that gets a little more money, then we have to be able to enable the trust for the buyer, for the end user, for the exporter. For that to happen, for Farmgate to happen, for us to get higher revenue, we need to be able to give these tools to be able to trace what they're doing and how they're doing it. One of the big initiatives that we've done is created free tools for the farmers to be able to register what they're using, where their location is, and what it is, to be able to create nanolots and understand what's coming in without connectivity, so that when they go to their aggregator or they go to their seller or they go to their people, that information is automatically synced and brought up. It's a process that takes time, but creating these types of tools allow us to really, really be able to create a traceable product which creates a market, which creates more money, which creates the ability to create these final contracts.
Fantastic. I don't know if on this issue of traceability also Anthony and maybe also Catalina later want to say something about it.
I just want to build real quick on Lewis's example. I think getting to that level of granularity and the digitization at that level is critical. Obviously, you can start further up, right? So do you want to trace an individual bag of coffee all the way through, or do you want to trace a shipment? Right, and to be able to get to a bag of coffee from a certain place requires a significant amount of digitization. So where do we aim to start with is kind of thing one. Thing two is the incentive structure. So we talked about this before, is don't let it cost the farmer, because they don't really have, they put the budget somewhere else if they had the choice. Secondly, if you're capturing that data, give it back to them. It's their data to use. So make sure that there's a way to have them use that data for a good purpose, whether that be for enabling them to get banking or enabling them to have access to insurance products or whatever else that you might be trying to provide. That's data that the farmers are collecting. So whether you provide that in the form of a spreadsheet, whether you provide that in the form of a piece of paper, right, that has a logo of Grain Chain or IBM Food Trust or whatever it is at the end of the week or end of the month or end of the year, you're able to say, this is my inventory, right? This is my sales out. And I can use that, again, to do other things in the market. That's super important.
Catalina, do you want to share?
Yeah, my 2 cents on traceability is just the hardest part of traceability is not the digital piece. It is the physical traceability of the product. So, you know, the digitization, yes, it's a challenge, but now there's so many tools to do this, but it is so expensive to keep coffee separately at different points in the chain. You know, the way the coffee supply chain works is coffee gets mixed at different points in time according to a bulking of a group, an exporter, somebody else, an importer, and then it is divided again in terms of quality specifications of specific buyers. So you've got a mixing and separation happening sometimes hundreds of times. To keep that completely separate means that you have to forego a lot of efficiencies that you could have. And then this is the piece that is really complex. If you have to store coffees separately within a warehouse and you have to create divisions and you cannot mix them when you put them in a machine, all of these are complexities that have to do with the physical traceability and the physical chain of custody with the coffees that I think is often overlooked versus, you know, the digitizing of the traceability. In comparison, we don't think that is the hardest piece.
Yeah. This is a very important thought, I think, actually. All right, so I think we need to start wrapping up. I'd like to ask all the panelists to answer like with a 10-second to a question that came in from Marcos from Brazil. Okay, Marcos is asking, what is the knowledge that most of the small producers lack that will be a game changer? Give me that. What do they need to know? Give me one word.
I can say that their value, the value of their product when they bring it to market is the biggest tool that they could have.
Wonderful.
And I would say that for the farmer to know who the customer, the final customer is, and what that customer is looking for, I think is very critical, and it will change the whole attitude of the farmer if they get to know and understand what the final consumer really is looking for.
For me, it's the value of data and what they can do once they have data that is theirs.
I would say that what farmers lack most is not a particular piece of knowledge. I would say they lack access to capital in a timely, safe, affordable manner to be able to run their farms at full potential, maximize their incomes.
Yeah, I will go. I agree with Fred. I think that it's important for the farmers to understand what is the quality that the final client wants. I remember that some programs that they did cupping test for farmers to show them how the final consumer judges their product, and that was an eye-opener.
Fantastic. Okay, with these last few words, I would like to again thank all the panelists. This was a fantastic panel. I wish we had 2 more weeks to keep on discussing these issues. But let me wrap it up here. Thank you again, everyone. And let me give back the floor to Joseph.
Oh, thank you very much, panel, and thank you very much, Professor Rocco. That's on the dot. Okay, that's it, folks. Before I go, I'm delighted to report that we have reached our target of 500 registrants. So we have 506. Thank you very much. Great job, everyone. And I hope that you enjoyed the event today. So send us some feedback, and we will try to make sure that the next event will be much, much more interesting. So we want to thank MasterCard for the keynote, our episode sponsor, Grain Chain, Professor Rocco from LSE, all the panelists in the industry partners, supporters, and all of the media partners, of course. And but most of all, I would like to thank our co-founder and her team, Mavis Chu at WCA, and also Kinura UK for helping us put this event together. So I hope that after this event, we can reflect and learn to do something good and get some real action to help the small farmer holders. So that what's next, then maybe we'll stay tuned in this channel and watch this space. We will have more exciting conversation with the old stakeholders. And we would like to say thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye. See you all again. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen. Adios. Lehitraut. May al salama. Salamat tinggal. And Tai Chen. Bye-bye.